I do believe that the chapter of Kosovo's long struggle for independence and nationhood is on the verge of being successful. I will do everything in my power as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee to lubricate the process. I want to thank my distinguished colleagues who are there, who have done so much to move this process forward. It has been a totally bipartisan effort. And before I sit down, I want to pay special tribute to my good friend and former colleague, the recent chairman of the committee, Henry Hyde, who along with Ben Gilman played an absolutely critical role in bringing us to this point. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Tom. Now, former Congressman DioGuardi, full disclosure, I happen to be married to him, although we had not met when he first became involved in this issue, which goes back to his first 2 terms in Congress in the middle 80s. Those terms followed a 22-year career as a CPA and tax partner in Arthur Anderson. And when he came to the U.S. Congress, one of the first things that happened to him was that Albanians discovered his father speaking Albanian, and they came up to him and said, well, we thought you were Italian, and now we see that you're not. And by the way, I think you came from a place called Kosovo. And that was the beginning of a major turning point, and at that time, and Joe has said this often, the only person in the U.S. Congress, who by the way is the only Holocaust survivor in the U.S. Congress, Tom Lantos, the only person who knew about the place called Kosovo, was Chairman Lantos. And together they went on an odyssey that, again, has brought us here to this day, along with former Chairman Hyde and former Chairman Gilman. Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, Chairman Lantos, for all you have done from the first day that I met Tom. I was elected in 1984 in a district that was carved for dictatorship. So you wouldn't expect a Republican to win in the lower part of Westchester County. But I realized there were a lot of ethnic Democrats there, and I had to advertise the fact that I was the son of immigrants. 2 poor people who came from Italy during the Depression, and they didn't have a good education. My dad went to the 4th grade, my mother went to the 8th. But thank God, America provided the opportunity. They had a grocery store in the Bronx, and that's where I was raised, in the back of that store. And I got a good education. And we moved to Westchester County. Little did I know in 1957, when we moved there, I'd be representing it in Congress in 1985. But when I got there, I realized that Westchester County was one of the most unique places to represent. You had the wealthiest people in America and the poorest people in America. So I represented a district that you could call the tale of 2 cities. But I realized very fast, with the large African-American population in Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle, and the very large Jewish population, Jewish-American, in Scarsdale, Mamaroneck, Harrison, Chappaqua, that I better learn fast about these human rights issues affecting these large groups. And here we had apartheid and Soviet Jewry. So I very quickly found Congressman Lantos, because he was the founder and co-chair of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, and became very active with him on the executive committee on those issues. That was from January 1985. Now comes September 20th, 1985, my first birthday in the Congress. And you know how it is, Congressmen use birthdays to raise money. And someone threw me a party in Westchester County and invited a lot of people. Some of these people happen to be ethnic Albanians working for the chairman of my finance committee, an African-American, and he brought them. And somehow they overheard my father, so Shirley wrote the story, and we give you the full story, speaking to his younger sister in Albania, a year before he passed away. and they come running up to me and saying, "What is your father's name? What is he doing speaking Albanian?" I said, "Well, I can tell you that when he came here in 1929, he spoke 2 languages, and one of them was English, Albanian and Italian." And you might say, "Well, how did that happen?" It's amazing that we in America don't really learn Eastern European history that much. And what it is that, the Turks were set on overrunning Europe in the 14th and 15th century. And Albania bore the brunt of it. There was a great Albanian general. His name was George Kastriati. And he fought the Ottoman Turks for 27 years, 20 battles, outnumbering some of them 200,000 to 10,000. He was a genius. You don't know about him here, Europe knows about him. He has his statues in Budapest, Vienna, and Rome. But they held the Turks back. But then, when he died of pneumonia in 1968, his son could not do the same. And 20 years later, the year was 1488, Albania fell. Tens of thousands of Albanians streamed across the Adriatic, only 45 miles to Italy. If you look at the map, Italy is only 45 miles from Albania at the closest point, the Straits of Otranto. So today in Italy, my wife and I brought National Geographic there in 1999. I couldn't believe it. You have 51 Albanian-speaking villages today in southern Italy. My father's happens to be the one closest to Naples. It's called Greci. Now, why would an Albanian village be called Greci, which means Greek? Because the first millennium, all of southern Italy was controlled by Greece. In fact, Naples, what is its real name? Neapolis, the new city. And this village was a gift by the King of Naples. Italy wasn't formed until 1861. The King of Naples, which included Sicily, was given to the soldiers of George Castriati for saving Italy from a French invasion in the year 1461. Would you believe it? I mean, this is incredible history. So here, my father comes from one of the 2,000 soldiers that George Castriati left as security for the Kingdom of Naples in the year 1461. And since he died in 1468, and the Turks overran Albania, they could never go back. So my father's people were stranded in Italy, and then many others came in the year 1488. Well, that's the beginning. So when I heard this group of Albanians running towards me and talking about, how is your father speaking Albanian? I said, well, I know there's this subculture in Italy, and it may go back to something about the Turks. I didn't know. My father didn't have the education to tell me. He said, no, you are from Kosovo. You came from what was Albania, but really Kosovo, and we need you. I said, what's Kosovo? I never heard of Kosovo. And I get to Congress, and I start checking with Congressman. The only one who knew Kosovo was Congressman Lantos. He was born in Hungary. And it was always a great coalition with the Hungarians and the Albanians as freedom fighters against the Ottoman Turks. In fact, you told me that a contemporary of George Castriati was the great Hunyadi, youngest Hunyadi, the freedom fighter at that time. Well, that's history. We're not going to decide anything based on history. As you know, we have to give America more than just a few casinos back, give it back to the Indians. We're not going to do that. We have to deal with current reality. And going to current reality, what happened that energized the Albanian people in 1985 when I was in Congress? What changed? You could have said, why did this happen in 1945? Why did it happen at some other time? Well, first of all, as Shirley said, you had the worst kind of communism controlling Albania from 1945 to 1990. Remember Embahoja? You couldn't get in and you couldn't get out. You'd be shot either way. And you had Tito's communism. Not as bad, but for Albanians, it was almost as bad, because they were the untermenschen of Yugoslavia. How did they get to Yugoslavia? They didn't move. The great powers did something that we're paying for today. And it was after the Balkan Wars, after World War I, someone decided that the Albanians were not really a separate race from the Slavs, and made the argument, Albanians, don't forget, were buried in the Ottoman Empire. They didn't have the chance to get out and do their diplomacy as the Greeks and Serbs did, because they had gotten out 50 and 100 years before. So here they are, never making their case, and someone convinced the Europeans that, Albanians are like the Slavs, and really half that Albania that declared its independence in 1912, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, should really be in this new state called Yugoslavia. Yugo meaning South, Slavia meaning Slavs. And Yugoslavia ended up with the Slovenes, Bosnians, Croatians, Macedonians, Serbs, Montenegrins, Vojvodina, you have 50% Hungarians there, and you had the 92% province, the Soviet. 8 juridical units, okay? Very complicated place. Held together by a very charismatic communist, not as bad as ever hold, his name was Tito. But when Tito died in 1980, all hell broke loose. The Serbs then saw the opportunity to reassert themselves, to dominate Yugoslavia. They were already one of the dominating republics, probably the largest one in terms of people. And what you had between 1981 and 1989, and I had to say it in this book, The Agony of Kosovo. This was written by me, this book put together for congressional hearings, because the press didn't know this, Congressman didn't know it, so I had to prepare an index to show what was going on in Yugoslavia that gave the Albanians such an incentive to get out of Serbia. And between 1981 and 1989, the year that Milosevic brutally occupied Kosovo, 600,000 Albanians were put through the peace processes in Kosovo. It was a state of terror, a peace state like you can't believe, all documented. Now, if you had read our State Department country reports, as a congressman I learned a lot in Congress, I mean, these are the things you don't learn at Arthur or even reading the New York Times, that the State Department reviews every year the condition of different states, and they comment on the condition of the human rights in those states. Well, obviously, now I'm interested in Kosovo. So in 1986 and 87, I started reading the country reports in the Balkans, and I can't believe what I'm reading. The most egregious human rights violations you can think of against the Albanian people are here being reported by our own State Department. And then I'm trying to say to myself, well, we got to do something. So I put in the first resolution in June of 1986, since nobody knew Kosovo, and at that point, Congressman Lantos was working on a lot of other things, I decided to put it in the House and got Bob Dole, who became a friend, because when the Republicans realized I was going to win this district, they then sent in President Ford, Bush, you name it, Dole, Kemp, everybody came in and I got to know them, and I told Bob Dole, I said, I need a Senate co-sponsor, and he did it. That was 1986. By 1987, when it was reintroduced, every 2 years, Congress ceases, you have to reintroduce it. We had 57 sponsors, and I just gave the resolution to Congressman Gilman because his name's on it, with Lantos and Gilman and Hyde, and it's wonderful. But at that point, I went to, don't forget, I'm a junior member of the minority party. The Democrats control the Congress. Now, how am I going to get traction with this issue? Well, I figured, let me play my Italian-American side. My mother was born with me as well as my father, but he spoke the Albanian. So I went to Dante Facel. Why? Because I remember working with Dante on Italian-American functions when I was very actively involved with those organizations when I was in Arthur. And I went to him, and he remembered me. He said, what can I do for you, Joe? I explained what the problem was. He said, you know, this issue's never come up, and it sounds to me like we should be able to do something. But you got to go see Gus Yatron. Now, Gus was a Greek-American, and he was chairman of the subcommittee for Europe and Human Rights. So I went to see Gus Yatron and got to know him, and I didn't realize that his daughter lived in New Rochelle, my district. So there was another connection with Gus Yatron. So we started talking. I said, well, we should be able to do something on this, right? Country report. So we decided to put this resolution in, and the next thing we know, it's like all hell broke loose. The State Department starts writing letters to everybody. Every 57 of those members that signed this resolution got a letter from the Undersecretary, and Dante Facel gets a 4-page letter explaining why we should do nothing at this point, because it would create more tensions. Yugoslavia has promised to get the reform, but as Shirley says, those reforms never came. Milosevic occupies Kosovo in 1989, puts a gun to the head of the assembly. Kosovo was a separate juridical unit of Yugoslavia. Every 8 years, the president of Kosovo was an Albanian. It had its own assembly. Milosevic forced the assembly to turn their power to Serbia. So in effect, there was no assembly. Congressman Lantos and I brought the assembly in exile to Luxembourg in 1991, and we kind of formed an interparliamentary group with England, the United States, and that assembly. Well, I think you know the rest. Between 1990, we went there in 1990, Congressman Lanto saw firsthand what that his worst fears will confirm. I described it as a Warsaw ghetto, and he said, no, it's amazing that this exists today in the heart of Europe where these people are being treated. We didn't know it. The press here wasn't covering it. Then what was going on? The war in Slovenia, 1990-91. The war in Croatia, 1992. The war in Bosnia. And what we have, Republican administration, and we have the Secretary of State saying, we don't have a dog in that fight. We must keep Yugoslavia together at all costs. And what does that do? Give the green light to Mr. Milosevic to keep going from one war to the other. And you saw what happened in Bosnia. 250,000 innocent civilians murdered in Srebrenica, 8,000 young men and their fathers with them put in a barn and just shot up. Things like this. I mean, you have to go back to the Nazi era to understand this. And then I realized what was coming. Because the biggest prize for the Serbs was going to be the Sova. And I had to step up. Thank God I met Shirley at that time. So we started to increase our lobbying efforts. We are volunteers. We formed this to help the Albanian people. We don't get paid for what we're doing. We have other professional responsibilities. But I have a thing that I was waving around to my congressional friends, and if I have it in here, I'll show it to you because it's an important document. Here it is. We had it translated from the Cyrillic. Don't forget, the Serbs don't use the Latin alphabet like the Albanians. They use the Cyrillic. And this was translated, and I found an Albanian sent to me. And he said, you have to have this translated because this plan was written in 1937 by the ultranationalist, then academician, who then became one of the ministers in the Belgrade government. But this is March 7, 1937. 2 years before Goring wrote the final solution for the Jewish people, they already had in writing how they were going to ethically cleanse the Albanian people from Kosovo. And if you read this, you wouldn't believe what it says. But if we can't buy their clerics, if we can't trick them, if we can't push them out, then we have to burn their houses. We must get them out. Well, this is what Milosevic was reading when he walked into Kosovo. And in 1998, Račak, what did they do? Walked into houses with guns, just killed innocent civilians. Very good. We had to find out later from Ambassador Walker that there was a mass grave there. They denied it. And then we had, obviously, the worst thing that you could ever visualize, 1 million people being put on railroad cars from Kosovo and out. And we witnessed on CNN something that we couldn't believe could exist in this century. That's how bad it got. Well, bottom line is, Milosevic was indicted for genocide, not just war crimes or human rights violations. And right now, the Albanians, who have been under a protectorate from the UN since 1999, and thank God, finally, the Congress did act to push Mr. Clinton to do what Mr. Bush wouldn't do, and that would be to intervene. Not easy for the United States to intervene, but we realized that if we didn't do it at that time, there would be carnage like you can't believe based on what we saw in Bosnia. So Mr. Clinton did it. Thank God for the Jewish lobby joining with the Albanian lobby at that point. 34 Jewish American congressmen realized that the Albanian people were not what the Serbs were saying. These were tolerant people. In fact, these are the people that saved every Jew in World War II. A predominantly Muslim population risked their lives. And we'll read a little book that we left there, Rescue Albania. It's the only state in Europe that saved every Jew in Albania and those that were lucky to escape into Albania from Western Europe and Yugoslavia. So today, we hope we get the justice for the Albanian people. Why is this important for us? Number one, we need peace and stability in Europe. It is in our vital interest. It's one of our biggest trading partners. There will be no peace and stability in Europe without settling the Balkan crisis, and this is a major component of that. And there are many other reasons why this is important. But think about this. Think about the Balkans. And think about the Albanian areas of the Balkans. Kosovo, 70% unemployment. Albania, 50% unemployment. 100,000 Albanians in southern Serbia, a place called Preševa Valley, 90% unemployment. Macedonia, well over 30-40% unemployment. Only remittances from the large Albanian families in Europe and America have kept those countries together at this point. The houses that were burned by the Serbs, 300,000, only 15,000 replaced by the UN. The rest were replaced mainly by European and American families, Albanian families sending money back. The other thing you should know is that the Albanians are now the youngest population in Europe. If you look at the 7 million Albanians, 3.5 in Albania, 2 million in Kosovo, almost 1 million in Macedonia, and you have Montenegro and Prisheva, you've got that 7 million, you're talking about 70% of them under 30, 50% under 25. Now, Europe doesn't want them. We don't want them. We're sending them back. We don't want them. As you know, a lot of them are illegal here. We can't wait to deport them. What are we going to send them back to? As Congressman Hines said, what are we trying to do? In the hearing in 2005, when he faced off with Ambassador Burns, he said, are we trying to create another Gaza Strip here? This time in Europe, where these kids will have precious little to do but throw stones? We need to make this a state so they can borrow from the World Bank, the IMF, the European Bank for Reconstruction, because without the infrastructure, the electricity goes on and off, 6 hours on, 6 hours off every day in Kosovo. How do you do things? How do you get new electric plants? Got to get new roads in order to provide the environment for real investment so you can put these people to work. And that's why this independence is more than an academic issue. It's very important. Not only to Albanians and the Balkans, but to Europe and then to us. But with that, thank you. We got to deal with the issue. Issue today is that 92% of Kosovo is Albanian. And as Congressman Lantos said, there is no chance that 92% who were almost exterminated by the Serbian people would now agree to be part of Serbia. And that's what the United Nations is dealing with.
I'll be very happy to deal with your very excellent question, because you are raising some very serious and substantive issues. The question of Russian foreign policy is dramatically broader than the issue of Kosovo. Somewhere along the line, the Kremlin will have to decide whether it wishes an increasing intensity of confrontation with Western Europe and the United States, or whether it wants to have a cooperative relationship. If it is the latter, the problem will solve itself in very short order, because there is overwhelming consensus behind the plan of the Finnish former President Ahtisaari to provide the people of Kosovo, who are over 90% Albanian, with a clear path to full independence, with full protection of the Serbian minority. One of the issues that I'm sure you'll be pleased to note is that during our hearing last week on this issue, every single member of Congress who spoke about the desirability of granting independence to the Albanians simultaneously emphasized the absolute non-negotiability of full protection to the Serbian minority. As a matter of fact, it is my view that the prime beneficiary of the Ahtisaari plan are not the Albanians, but they are the Serbians, who today are attempting to bring under their control a population which is overwhelmingly, deeply opposed to them, detests them for their recent horrific acts, and since Serbia, as all the other European nations, can find its full fruition only by joining the European Union, will never be able to join the European Union as long as it insists on dominating Kosovo with a 92% Albanian population. So the only way to open the door for Serbian membership in the European Union is for Kosovo to gain its independence. I have full confidence that over a period of time, and it may take a number of months, the Serbians behind the scenes will persuade the Russians, their supporters, that it is in Serbia's interest to let the Ahtisaari plan proceed. As a matter of fact, there is little doubt in my mind, having been to Belgrade repeatedly in recent times, that privately the Serbian leadership is fully cognizant of the fact that Kosovo independence is on its way, and since Serbia desperately wants to be part of Europe, as it should be, and part of the European Union, as it should be, they are secretly hoping that the resolution of this issue will be found.
Exactly.
There was a time in Iraq where a dramatic escalation of military forces could have brought us an entirely different result than the one we have today. General Shinseki, the head of our army, 5 years ago, proposed that the invasion take place with several 100,000 people, because he clearly understood that while the defeat of the Iraqi army could be very fast and relatively not very costly, which in fact was the case, the occupation of the country would be dramatically more demanding, requiring vast numbers of additional troops. That solution cannot be superimposed on 2007. You cannot unscramble the omelette. Now, had there been a benign and friendly Belgrade government many years ago, offering the Albanians full autonomy, which is what you are talking about, that could have been a viable solution. Because in Europe, fortunately, we have, at the end of the rainbow, the possibility of joining the European Union. And it would have made very little difference to the people in Pristina whether they joined the European Union having a central government in Belgrade or a government in Pristina. But given the ethnic cleansing, given the brutality, given the bloodbath, given the rapes, given this unbelievable cruelty with which the Kosovars were treated, to talk about autonomy in 2007 is wholly unrealistic. So while I recognize your good intentions, I am merely suggesting that history moves on, and some solutions which at some points could have been viewed as potentially feasible, with the passage of time and with the intervening of events, very ugly events, is no longer realistic. As far as Congress's posture towards the Kosovo situation is concerned, while I can only speak for myself, it is my judgment that the overwhelming majority of my colleagues, both in the Senate and in the House, will fully support the Ahtisaari plan. The Ahtisaari plan, which is such a rational, reasonable, modest, compromise-rich formula, that I would be amazed if overwhelmingly Congress would not stand behind it.